Hey, Brian. So, a few questions for you today about programming projects.
Let's do it.
Why do you think programming should be learned by building projects?
I think it's one of those skills that you can't really learn by reading. I'll never forget this summer that I wanted to learn HTML, and please don't judge me too harshly. I picked up a whole book on this and I read it like cover to cover, thinking this is how you learn, like in school, right? I sat down at my computer. Again, I think I used Notepad plus plus or something at the time. And I just realized I had like no, it sounds naive and ridiculous at the time, but I had no clue. This is like a builder's sport. So I feel like in order to actually understand how to make these conceptual things practical, like whether you're trying to learn something like program can be really conceptual. So if you're not building while you're doing it, it just becomes this conceptual thing and you can't actually make it real. So this is one of those things that I feel like you can really only learn by building. And now even when I want to pick up a new programming language or learn something new, my first thought is, what am I going to build?
Cool. I think my experience has been the same. Many years ago, I tried to learn C reading a book. It just doesn't work. You need to actually have typed that bit in and like, main, what arguments does it take? What are the types? But you've got to build something, haven't you?
Exactly.
So what projects did you build?
Over the years, I've built a lot of projects. I think, so I've been mostly front end / full stack, and I started my career off like really front end focused, like HTML, CSS, and jQuery at the time. And then I get my first job and it's SQL, C#, .NET, AngularJS. And I'm like way out of my league, especially with C#, right? Coming from like a JavaScript background. So I think what was the first thing I made? It was this ridiculous little app to like track the scores for bowling. I don't even know anything about bowling. I think I just like read some article, and then I decided to make this like tool, like a form that you could use that would like you could add in your score, your name, and you could submit this to a backend and store this in SQL. This taught me a little bit of C#. Over the years, my projects got more complex. I started thinking, well, what could I sell? I had this entrepreneurial kind of streak. And then for my next project, I was like, I need to learn React, because at the time I knew AngularJS. I went to a place that was using Ember. I didn't know anything about AWS. I just kept hearing all these things in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm like, I got to learn this stuff. And so a friend of mine came to me and said, hey, man, let's build a real estate app. And I'm like, I'll do it. And I thought, we're going to become millionaires, and I'm going to use all this cool technology. It failed terribly, but I forced myself to learn React, and then I deployed it on AWS. I learned about lambdas and serverless, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. This isn't that difficult to learn. I made this horrible React app, and then I went from Ember, Angular, C# developer to a mid-level position at a startup in San Francisco where you had to know AWS and React. So I taught myself this in this real estate app where you could go in there and try to find houses and facilitate the transactions and all the documents that you need in the US to purchase a house. We wanted to basically automate the contract process.
So that's so cool. You're learning real software engineering because you're building a real project. Where those of us are still trying to read from a book are still learning to build a factorial function or calculate the next number in a Fibonacci series, or calculate whether a number's prime, and that doesn't scale, does it? Doesn't give you that AWS skills.
No, and no one really hires for, that was the thing. Like, it helps in an interview really quickly, but like if they want to know, like, hey, can you actually integrate into a team and build with the stack we use? And this is the case at most startups, where they're not hiring for your like general programming ability. They're saying, hey, do you actually know this technology? And that was a way I was able to pick it up.
So picking the project gave you some real world experience and a good portfolio project. It was interesting to show.
Exactly.
Cool. So what else did you learn from building a real project?
I think a big one was planning. That was a huge one. Like, I made some really silly mistakes, especially with the real estate app. That was a project that spanned for about a year and a half. I continued this project. It really became almost a true startup. We were trying to get funding and all this kind of stuff. We ended up getting like $10,000 offer and just turning it down because $10,000 was a silly amount for what we had built at the time. But we had started off, we were trying to build something almost like Zillow and for the Bay Area. And me being really naive and young in my career, so I think I had 2 years experience, and I was like just building out the front end and didn't realize, well, where are we going to get this data from? How do you, and then I had to call up all these real estate agencies and then figure out where they got data from. It's really complicated. It's not cheap. and you have to do it through all these different agencies, depending on which state in the US you live and county. And it just quickly showed me, wow, we did all this work. We did a month and a half or 2 months of work just to find out what we're building is impossible. And so we transitioned into documents and the loan automation piece, which was much more straightforward. But it taught me, well, what happens next? And then every now when I work with students or I talk to other people about their side project, I'm always like, well, so let's start with the data. Because without data, you don't really have anything. You can make the best UI you want, but you don't have anything without data. And then, so this taught me a lot about planning, which helped me out tremendously as I not only went to senior engineer, but then went to like engineering manager. And so a lot of these like glorified projects that I made actually helped me out to like plan out and do research, because that's, as you know, a huge part of doing any moderately complex project.
Yeah, it's so true. One of the biggest like questions I get for the Coding Challenges newsletter is, how do I go about planning a project?
Yeah.
I've written these functions, I've learned programming from a book. I have no idea how to start a project and how to plan it out, how to break it down. So again, that's often my answer is that's why you need to build real software, because you face these issues you don't get just watching a video. When somebody shows you how to do it and you see the highlight reel, they don't talk about the planning. They show you, like this function, add this feature, use this bit of the language. They don't show you all the pain they went through of figuring it out, do they, and the building blocks and the planning they did. Cool. So, out of the Coding Challenges projects, I'm up to 100 now. Do you have a favorite? And if so, what is it?
Man, one of the ones that was the most confusing for me, at least, I'll be honest, I haven't really completed almost any of them. I've read a lot of them. The QR code one was the one that kind of like, how the hell do you even start with this one? And I looked at some of the solutions for it with like, I think it was like using things that I'm not really familiar with, like bit masking, I think. Just the idea, because it seems like such a simple technology. That was the thing that I think really tripped me up, that I'm like, well, how hard could this be? Because you're right, you could just use a library to just abstract the whole problem away and be like, oh, there's like a library to do that. But if you want to actually implement the functionality to create a QR code, I was like, I don't even know where you start. Like things like the Redis. I have at least a mental model for Redis, because you use Redis, but QR codes are something we all use all the time. And I realized how much of a black box it was. And then looking at the solutions, I'm like, oh, this is actually way more complex than I ever would have thought. Kind of appreciate, but it's also, it makes your brain just kind of break, because you see like there's a problem and there's like, that's it. And you're like, oh, how am I going to figure this out? So it kicks off that spark that I think most software engineers have, where like, I got to try to figure this out. So I do want to try to go back to the QR code one, and I do want to learn some Python this year. So I think that might be, I don't know if that's one I'm going to start with. Maybe I'll start with Redis, or the port scanner one was a cool one too. But those are the ones that stick out in my mind.
Yeah, the QR code one, I think, deceives a lot of people, because you say it seems so simple, but when you look into it, there's so much you can learn in there about images, edge identification, identifying the parts of the image, reading it, decoding it, the error correction algorithms. There's so much in there. Again, if you don't really know where to start, it's quite hard.
Yes.
But that's the joy of Coding Challenges. I've broken some of those steps down, giving you that step-by-step approach to getting it done. And again, it helps that, if you dig into it, there's specifications linked from the Coding Challenge. And that has a lot of detail. It's almost unbelievable. I think it's about 140 pages of detail of all the little nuances.
That's right. I need to look over that, because I was like, I'll look at that later. And I'm like, let me think how I could do this. Big mistake, obviously. But yeah, those challenges are really, really good. I mean, they really take you from a lot of the toy projects. And I think the other problem with projects that you see outside, like in YouTube, for example, or Udemy, is that to me, it's not as fun building the same thing that a million people have built. And then I don't feel like you're getting the same level of knowledge or challenge that you get with something like the challenges you've built, which are much more difficult. They're more interesting to talk about. And luckily they've been built. So you can judge your solution against other people's and the real version out there that's working too. So it's very cool. It's a lot more fun than building like a movie finder, for example, especially if you're further in your career. You're like, I don't want to build a movie finder.
Yeah. And for example, with the Redis project, a lot of people get a huge amount of satisfaction from seeing whether or not their server performs anywhere near as well as the real Redis.
Yeah.
So that's a fun one. All right. Awesome. Thank you very much for that, Brian. Enjoy talking to you about programming projects.
Yeah. Looking forward to talking again, man. Thank you.